and a friend of the program and a guy who I'm pleased to call a friend, Scott Boras, back here on the Rich Eisen Show. I think he represents how many people in Major League Baseball? 1 million people in Major League Baseball?
Yeah, roughly.
Roughly, right around there, give or take a few. Scott Boras back here on the show. How are you, Scott?
Hi, Rich. I hope that you and Susie and the family are all well.
We are.
And safe.
How about you? Everything good with you and yours?
Yes. You talk to so many people back east, particularly in the Northeast, and those of us that are out here, the virus has really just brought a different experience for a lot of reasons. So, I think we're very fortunate, and I'm happy for them that things are mitigating and we're getting this under control a bit.
Yeah, I'm knocking on wood on that, and obviously a return to normalcy would feel a lot more comforting for a lot of people with the return of sports. And so I'm wondering, what can you tell us as we sit here right now about what you know about what baseball and its Players Association is discussing about a return to action in 2020, Scott?
The players I represent and the union, they've really been at the forefront of working with MLB, because obviously this is not the fault of anyone. And it was really good in March that right after baseball shut down, the two sides got together and really worked hard, rolled up their sleeves, and put together some parameters that certainly allowed, I think, a platform and a foundation for them to put a focus together and allow baseball to continue. I think the players made a substantial. Under the CBA, there was 162 games that were owed and about $4.5 billion in salaries, and the players basically have taken a substantial salary cut in the sense that they didn't obligate the owners to offer those 162 games, and basically said we're going to get paid on a pro rata basis going forward, and so it's that's something I think that Tony Clark and the union leadership and the players really got to that point, saying we're going to work hard to be a good partner and compromise in this thing to go forward.
So that was back then, and now I guess the fact that there's going to be no fans in the stands, according to baseball, changes the financial equation of whatever was agreed to back in March, and that appears to be the issue that's at hand right now. Am I correct in that assumption, Scott?
No, I think in March, actually the virus was much worse and much more unknown then, and I think it was very clear, and the parties kind of have an agreement that there's, if games are to be played, there's it has to be economically feasible, and the two sides would sit down and talk about that feasibility, and certainly the evidence to date is because of the television contracts and regional, national, and in the postseason, which the owners actually have a kind of a bonanza because they don't share any of those billion-dollar type rights with the players, is that there is ample economics to suggest it's very feasible to play games without fans and have owners and such certainly have a season where they're not going to make the money that they did in a normal dynamic, neither will the players, but still continue with a productive schedule.
So I'm trying to pick up what you're putting down here, Scott. So if baseball is in fact trying to term the March agreement as inoperative based on the current virus boots, figuratively, as you know, on the ground, that would be a non-starter, or what?
I think these are bridges already built based upon the conditions that were far worse then because of the unknowns. I mean, again, there's a direction about economic feasibility that guys will discuss whether or not they play games. But in the process of that, there's always there was already an agreement and discussion as to whatever games they do play. We know that the players will receive a pro rata share of their salaries for doing it. So those are two separate issues, whether or not they play games or not, or what players are paid as what the parties agreed to back then.
So, I mean, Scott Boras here on the Rich Eisen Show. So fans are hearing, at least last week, a 50-50 revenue split would be what baseball's looking for, and fans hear that, oh, okay, that's fair. You're each taking half, and then players are saying, or at least Players Association saying that that's not good at all. As a matter of fact, it's something that Blake Snell said he wasn't willing to risk playing. Can you explain why the players take that stance then, Scott?
Well, my point is that in fairness to the parties that are negotiating this, the union and Major League Baseball, and certainly from the players I represent, the context of how they work over the years is that we don't have a salary cap. We don't have we have a bargaining history that is completely different. Mm-hmm. I've learned long ago that the definition of revenue is something that is, it's like galaxies. It's undefinable. You can't really determine what revenue is because there's so many ways to move that needle around. But essentially, look, baseball, I mean, we have one public company that we know because they file returns, the Atlanta Braves. They were purchased 15 years ago for $450 million, and now they're worth $1.8 billion. Their revenues in 2016 were $260 million. Now they're $475 million. They're making a great deal of money, and so in those instances, you don't hear anything about any form of radical change about a change of our structure and what we do without a salary cap and going to revenue sharing. But the point is, it was never ever requested or sought for because they privatized the gains. So you can't privatize the gains and socialize the losses and these things. You have a platform, you do what you do. But in fairness to everybody, this concept, I think, came into the media, Rich, but I don't think there's any evidence. I think the parties are working as they should work, and I'm not involved in that negotiation, but I would certainly think that, we just need to give them time to work through what they're going to work through before we make any assessments. But we have a very healthy game. The owners in baseball have nearly tripled their values and their franchises for those that have over clubs over 10 years, and the game is very, very healthy. We have obviously a pandemic and a public health issue that got in the way of this that really affected the players and what their earnings are, and it affects the owners and what their earnings are. And I'm sure that the methods with which they deal are going to be more patterned along the lines of the structures that were in place prior to them going into this negotiation.
Scott Boras here on the Rich Eisen Show. And before we do move into what you know, or what your clients know about the safety and the health issues and baseball's protocols that they've put together, I just want to spend one last question on the revenue side of things here, because again, you're not in the negotiation, as you pointed out, and you're not in the union, but you do represent a large number of players, many of whom are very famous, and the ones who, if they say something, would definitely move the needle. So that said, I've wondered about what's going on right now, and you've said many times about what happened in March, as if that is this is a settled issue in terms of revenue, and it seems like baseball is making it seem as if it is not a settled issue, and that is the issue that I'm concerned about. Do you think that is something that can be eventually settled so we can get to baseball here, Scott?
The parties understand that there's an economic feasibility, that in good faith that they are in discussion. And I think to date, this is something that should not be discussed publicly, but they're going to be talking privately about demonstrating the economic quotient here. Certainly our data, because we know the TV contracts, and we know what players are making for a partial season, is that the bottom line is it's definitely, without question, more beneficial for owners to play and have a season and earn those media contracts without fans than it is for them to not play and suffer very serious losses by not producing the game. And, Rich, remember, there are many players who have guaranteed contracts going into the 21 season and well beyond. You do not want your athletes and the assets of your franchise to not perform for a year and then come back and play, because you don't want starting pitchers going from where they were throwing maybe 140, 150 innings, and then they platform into a couple hundred innings in 21. You don't want them going from zero and not pitching for over a year to then being asked to throw 200 innings. That would result in a dramatic impact on the potentials for injury and diminution of skill. So you've got a whole element of this, in my mind, that prompts, if you're a franchise owner and preserving the skills that you have, your development of your players, the preservation of your existing assets, that you definitely have very strong reasons economically to say we need to play baseball.
A few more minutes left with Scott Boras of Boras Corporation here on the Rich Eisen Show. I'm assuming you've read the 60-plus page document that baseball put together for health protocols, and I'm wondering what you thought of it, Scott. Do you think that this is doable?
Well, I think what we've done is that with our clients, we've gotten doctors, and we've studied the therapeutics, and as you know, Rich, I have a medical background and study pharmacology, so we've done a lot of educational work over the last 2 months with our clients about what the expert immunologists, serologists, virologists have to say about this. And I think the players have a good understanding because of their age group and where they're at with, making an assessment of the safety. The great thing is, too, we've got an operational model in Korea and Taiwan where people have been together and playing for over 90 days. There's not been any hospitalizations. And obviously the survival rate is 100%. So we're really looking at all that information. And when we get health care professionals, they're going to give a very concerned and professional opinion about what they want players to follow. And then on the other side of it, players have to look into the fact of the functionality and the needs of them performing what they do on the field, and also what they must do to prevent injury. And so I think you look at both sides of that, and you take a close look. You talk about the profession, the needs to sustain performance and sustain a career, and you also talk about the public health issue needs from those professionals, and I think you map it out, and I think that process is ongoing.
Okay, last one for you, Scott. The $64,000 question, proverbially, or $4 billion question, literally, from what we're hearing. Brass tacks it for me. I'm sure you get this question all the time. I'll just add my name to that list. Do you think there's baseball in 2020?
Well, Rich, I think because when you study medicine, you understand that the prohibitive factor on this is the medical expert opinion about the safety and care of the process, of the people involved, and everyone. And once you know that the medical science, we're talking about now, we have vaccines that are going to be coming hopefully a lot earlier, the therapeutics, the testings have advanced. There's even new testing mechanisms on the forefront that are more immediate and accurate. When you have all those things evolved with the great medical minds, that's what's making me so positive about the idea that we can create an employment environment and a game and put it on and continue and frankly give America something that really tells us we're back to normalcy. I think it's a big barometer for that. And so I'm very encouraged about where we are from with our understanding of the virus from the medical community, and that's really what's given me a very optimistic view about the return of baseball.
Scott, thanks for the time. Glad to hear everybody's happy and healthy in your neck of the woods. Let's keep in touch.
Always a pleasure, Rich.
Right back at you. That's Scott Boras right here on the Rich Eisen Show. Scott Boras, again, representing 175 players in Major League Baseball, and actually a man who received his Doctor of Pharmacy degree from the University of Pacific in 1977. So he wasn't joking.
Nope.
He wasn't joking. Hey, you watched all the way to the end. Thanks for that. Watch more right here.